It began on the cold edge of the Vexorian border, a lonely stretch of space where nothing interesting ever happened, where the stars had grown so familiar that even the officers on patrol stopped paying attention to them. A giant alien fleet drifted lazily through the region, hundreds of ships arranged in wide formation, each vessel glowing with soft blue lights. Inside the command decks, the atmosphere was loose, casual, almost too relaxed. Officers stretched in their chairs, bored out of their minds, drinking warm stim coffee and mocking old stories from ancient history. They laughed especially loudly whenever someone mentioned the word Terran. To them, humans were nothing more than ghost tales, stories told by grandparents around dim lights, warnings from an era that no longer mattered. Humans vanished thousands of years ago, Commander Trivax said, waving a hand dismissively while scanning a hologram screen for entertainment rather than threats. Terran ships? Please. Those were barely warships. More like flying metal cans. His crew laughed again, their voices echoing in the spacious bridge. Some officers pulled up ancient images of crude human technology to pass around as jokes. Others competed to see who could tell the most exaggerated legend about the Terrans. Stories of humans lifting starships with their bare hands, or surviving black holes, or screaming so loud it broke glass. They thought it was hilarious. They thought it was safe. They thought the galaxy belonged entirely to them. Outside their windows, the stars shimmered like harmless candles. Nothing looked dangerous. Nothing looked alive. Nothing looked strange. But all of that changed in one single moment, so fast that the laughter still hung in the air when the first alarm flashed. Every sensor on every ship froze at the exact same time. Hundreds of screens went dark, then struggled to reboot. A heavy silence fell across the bridge, thick and sudden, cutting through every joke like a blade. Officers stopped smiling. They leaned forward in confusion, tapping their screens, trying to bring their systems back online. But nothing responded. Not one command. Not one button. Not one scanner. It was as if the entire fleet had been caught in an invisible web. Then, without warning, a new signal appeared. A faint dot pulsed on the outer rim of the long-range scanners, so small at first that most assumed it was debris or a drifting satellite. But the longer they watched, the more the dot grew. It grew slowly, steadily, like something huge was approaching from the dark side of the galaxy. It moved in a straight line, without speed fluctuations, without broadcasting identity codes, without showing heat signatures. It moved like a shadow, like a ghost, like something alive. The officers leaned closer, fear beginning to replace boredom. "What is that?" one asked, voice trembling slightly. "It's too big to be a mining ship," another whispered. "Too slow to be a missile." The dot kept growing. The scanners tried to identify it, but every line of text returned the same message. Unknown, unknown, unknown. Commander Trivax felt a chill crawl up his back, the first real fear he had felt in years. "Increase resolution," he ordered quietly. The technician obeyed, fingers shaking as she adjusted the hologram. The dot sharpened and became a shape. A long, dark, massive shape slowly gliding through space. The bridge fell completely silent. No one moved. No one dared to guess. They all leaned forward instinctively as the silhouette grew clearer, revealing a structure so enormous that the Vexorian ships looked like toys in comparison. The shape had sharp angles, heavy armor plates, and a hull thick enough to withstand suns. It moved with no lights, no sound, no glow, just pure, ancient presence. And then the scanners finally cleared enough to show the ship's outline. The unmistakable silhouette of a Terran battleship. Every officer froze. Every breath stopped. Every heartbeat felt like thunder in their ears. A Terran battleship. A ship that should not exist. A ship that had vanished from the galaxy thousands of years ago. A ship everyone believed destroyed during the Great Human Purge. But there it was. Real. Huge. Alive. Moving straight toward them. The laughter from minutes earlier felt like it belonged to another universe. Officers stared at the hologram in total disbelief, eyes widening, jaws dropping, minds refusing to understand what they were seeing. This is impossible," the technician whispered, her voice breaking. "Terran ships were wiped out," another officer said, shaking his head violently as if trying to wake himself from a nightmare. They can't be here. They can't. But the ship came closer, slow and steady, like a sleeping giant waking up after centuries of silence. The alien fleet's communication channels erupted in panic. Captains shouted across the network, demanding answers from their scanners, their admirals, their historians. Some officers grabbed old records, digging through forgotten files for any sign of Terran technology that matched the silhouette. They found nothing. Nothing beyond myths. Nothing beyond fear. Commander Trivax felt sweat forming on his forehead. His throat felt dry. He forced himself to stand straight, his voice shaking as he said, "All ships, prepare for combat." But no ship moved. Engines refused to ignite. Weapons refused to charge. Shields remained offline. It was as though the entire Vexorian fleet had been paralyzed by an unseen hand. The Terran battleship drifted closer, its massive hull now fully visible through the thick glass of the bridge windows. It was a monstrous vessel, larger than any dreadnought in the known galaxy. Smooth black armor covered its frame, glimmering faintly with old Terran markings, symbols that looked like scars left behind from ancient wars. Some markings glowed faint blue, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. Others were deep engravings, rough and cracked from battles no living alien had ever witnessed. Officers trembled as they saw the enormous cannons lining the ship's sides, weapons that could easily tear through moons. None of them were activated. None of them needed to be. The sheer size of the vessel alone was enough to crush the courage of everyone watching. Trivax stepped back instinctively as the ship drew even closer. His voice broke into a whisper. "This thing, it's bigger than our command station." Suddenly, the Terran ship emitted a soft vibration, so faint it was almost imperceptible, yet strong enough to make every alien on the fleet freeze at once. A low hum, like the exhale of a machine older than any civilization in the galaxy. "What do they want?" someone whispered. No one answered. No one could. Then, slowly, the ship rotated. Its front came into view. And everyone saw the impossible. The Terran emblem. A bright, ancient symbol etched deep into the hull. A human hand gripping a burning star. The emblem glowed, steady and powerful. It had no reason to glow. No purpose. And yet its light felt like a warning. A reminder. A truth carved into metal. The crew stared at it with shaking breaths, their hearts pounding with a mix of awe and terror. "It's real," the technician whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "Humans are real." The bridge filled with trembling silence. No one laughed now. No one joked. No one doubted. Because now they knew. Everything the galaxy had called a myth was the truth. Everything they joked about was real. Everything they erased from history had returned. And the ship before them, the Terran battleship drifting silently across the border, was only the beginning. Systems across the Vexorian fleet flickered violently, then shut down again, as if the Terran vessel's presence alone disrupted their entire network. Ships drifted helplessly. No engines. No shields. No weapons. Nothing. Commander Trivax felt helpless for the first time in his life. He tried to call for reinforcements. No signal left his ship. He tried to open a channel to the mysterious vessel. His screen went black. He tried to speak, but his voice died in his throat. The Terran battleship stopped moving. Right in front of them. A giant shadow against the stars. Watching. Studying. Waiting. The entire Vexorian fleet hung motionless, frozen in fear, unable to do anything except stare at the silent titan before them. And then, something completely unexpected happened. A single line of text appeared on every screen, written in simple Terran English: "Do not enter this region again." Nothing else. No threat. No anger. No fear. Just a calm order. A quiet instruction. A warning. The bridge filled with trembling breaths. Officers exchanged terrified looks. Trivax felt his blood run cold. The ship didn't attack them that IT didn't need to. Because the message said everything. Because the ship itself said everything. Because its presence alone spoke a truth the galaxy wasn't ready to face. Humans were not gone. Humans were not forgotten. Humans were watching, And the entire Vexorian fleet understood the truth in that single moment. They had seen a Terran battleship for the first time in thousands of years, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Vexorian fleet floated in total silence, hundreds of ships frozen with their engines dead and their crews paralyzed with fear as the Terran battleship hung before them like a silent god carved from darkness. No one dared to speak. No one dared to blink. Every alien stared at the enormous vessel, trying to understand how something so old, so impossible, so legendary could be real. The bridge of the flagship felt like a tomb, dim lights flickering, screens pulsing weakly, the air so tense that every breath sounded like thunder. Commander Trivax could feel his heart hammering against his ribs. His hands trembled at his sides, his throat tightening each time he looked at the massive human warship outside the viewport. It didn't move. It didn't glow. It simply existed. And that was enough to crush everything he believed about power, about history, about safety. The technicians worked desperately to restart the systems, but nothing responded. The Terran battleship had shut down their entire fleet with nothing more than its presence. "Why aren't they firing?" whispered an officer, voice thin and shaky. "Because they don't need to," another replied, eyes wide with horror. They stared at the Terran vessel, its hull glowing faintly with old blue runes, runes that pulsed like quiet breaths. It felt alive. Not like a machine. Not like a ship. But like something ancient and aware. The fear that filled the bridge wasn't the fear of death. It was the fear of being judged by something far greater. Across the fleet, soldiers stood frozen at their posts, staring at their dark screens with tears gathering in their eyes. A young Vexorian pilot named Selka whispered a prayer she had not spoken since childhood, her hands shaking as she looked at the Terran ship through the cockpit glass. She didn't know why, but she felt guilt. A deep, aching guilt she couldn't explain. "Did we do something to them?" she whispered to no one. Her co-pilot swallowed hard. "Our ancestors did." Selka's breath hitched. The Terran ship drifted slightly, just a tiny shift, and the entire fleet flinched as if struck. It was so quiet, too quiet. The silence felt alive, like it pressed against their skin. Sensors crackled uselessly. Communications remained dead. The only thing the Vexorians could do was stare and wait. Wait for what? They didn't know. And that made everything worse. Back on the flagship, Commander Trivax felt a sudden wave of emotion hit him. Not fear, not anger, but something far more unsettling, shame. It rose inside him like a tide, choking him, squeezing his chest. He didn't understand it at first. Why shame? Why guilt? Humans were supposed to be myths, not victims. His ancestors always described humans as monsters, conquerors, destroyers. But standing before this Terran battleship, Trivax understood something horrifying. They had been lied to. Lied to for generations. Lied to for comfort. Lied to so no one would question the past. The Terran ship didn't look like a conqueror. It looked like a survivor. A survivor of something terrible. Something done long ago. Something the Vexorians never bothered to learn about. Trivax felt cold tears gather in his eyes as he whispered, "What did we do to them?" The bridge around him fell into a deeper silence. No one dared to answer. Because deep inside, every officer felt the same crushing realization. They didn't know the truth, and they feared the truth more than they feared the ship outside. Then, unexpectedly, the Terran battleship emitted a faint hum. Not a weapon charge. Not an attack signal. A heartbeat. A slow, steady vibration that rolled through space like a wave of ancient memory. Every ship trembled. Every alien felt the sound inside their bones. The technicians screamed as lights flickered wildly and then stabilized. A moment later, the hologram projector on the flagship flashed to life. A tiny sphere of blue light hovered in the air, rotating slowly. The crew stepped back, terrified. Is that them?" someone whispered. The sphere expanded, forming shapes, lines, patterns, and then an image. A human symbol. Simple. Clean. Old. A single Terran star. The room filled with gasps, some of fear, some of awe, some of sorrow. Commander Trivax stared at the symbol, his chest pounding. He knew this symbol. He had seen it only once, in forbidden archives that no one believed. Those records called the Terrans the Lost Ones. The Forgotten. The Erased. Now the symbol glowed before him, undeniable, real. The symbol shifted, and an audio signal followed. A whisper. A soft, almost tired human voice. Do not be afraid. The voice was calm, gentle. Nothing like the monsters his people had described. The aliens froze, tears forming in some of their eyes because the voice didn't sound dangerous. It sounded sad. So sad that it made even the strongest soldiers' hearts ache. We are not here for war, the voice continued. Trivax felt his knees weaken. Not because of fear, because of relief. But the relief didn't last long. The voice added softly, but we have not forgotten. The atmosphere thickened, suffocating. Some officers covered their mouths. Others lowered their heads. Everyone understood. The Terrans remembered the past. Whatever happened thousands of years ago, it still lived in their hearts. The sphere flickered again, showing a brief hologram of old human ruins. Broken buildings, burning skies, children running in fear. The image lasted only a heartbeat before fading away, but it was enough. Tears rolled down Selka's face as she watched from her fighter. Why did no one tell us? She whispered. Her co-pilot couldn't speak. The guilt was too heavy. The Terran battleship didn't move, didn't attack, didn't threaten. It just existed with a quiet sadness that broke the hearts of everyone watching. Because now, the aliens understood, they were not facing a monster. They were facing a memory shaped into steel. A memory that refused to die. Suddenly, every system in the Vexorian fleet rebooted at once. Lights flared. Engines hummed. Shields glowed. Weapons came online. But not because the fleet repaired itself. Because the Terran ship allowed it. It gave them back their power like a parent returning a toy to a frightened child. The gesture was not mercy. It was a warning. Trivax stared at his screens, breath trembling. They're letting us go, he whispered. Every officer exhaled a breath they didn't realize they were holding. The Terran battleship slowly turned its massive hull away from them. Not in fear. Not in weakness. Simply because the Vexorian fleet no longer mattered. They were no threat. They were only witnesses. As the Terran ship drifted back into the shadowed region of space beyond the Vexorian border, one final message appeared across every screen, written in calm, chilling Terran letters, do not return. The bridge filled with silence. Heavy. Emotional. Heartbreaking. Commander Trivax closed his eyes. We should leave. Now. No one argued. No one hesitated. The entire fleet turned around, engines igniting with shaky energy, and began the slow retreat home. Every ship moving away from the Terran border like frightened animals escaping the gaze of a silent predator. But even as they fled, one truth echoed in every heart. They had seen a Terran battleship for the first time in thousands of years, and they finally understood why their ancestors tried to erase the humans from history. It wasn't because humans were weak. It was because humans were unforgettable. The Vexorian fleet retreated through space in complete silence, engines humming softly like frightened breaths as every ship tried to put distance between themselves and the Terran battleship that had frozen their souls. No songs played through the broadcasts. No officers argued. No commanders shouted orders. The entire fleet moved like a single creature wounded by fear, shaking, confused, and ashamed. Inside the flagship, Commander Trivax sat in his chair with his hands clasped tightly, staring at the dark void ahead but seeing only the Terran ship burned into his mind. His heart felt heavy, weighed down by 1,000 unanswered questions. Why did they let us go? He whispered, though no one dared respond. The bridge crew avoided looking at each other, afraid that eye contact might break whatever fragile calm they had left. Some officers bowed their heads, trembling with emotions they didn't know how to describe. Others kept wiping their eyes, pretending it was dust. But everyone felt the same piercing truth. They had been judged, and the Terrans had chosen mercy, not because the Vexorians deserved it, but because the humans were something far greater than the stories ever said. Just when the fleet thought the nightmare was behind them, a sharp crackle filled every speaker on board every ship. Static at first, soft and broken, like a voice trying to cross a distance too long for comfort. The crew froze, the same anxiety returning like a cold wave. Then the static sharpened, cleared, and an old human voice spoke. Calm, soft, quiet, but heavy with emotion. Do not fear us. The entire bridge froze again. The voice did not match any database. It was older, worn by time, carrying memories instead of threats. We did not choose the past, the voice continued, echoing across every ship in the fleet. But the past chose us. Trivax felt his body tense. Images flashed in his mind. Human ruins, burning skies, abandoned colonies. He gulped hard. Are they talking to us? He whispered. No one answered. They couldn't. The voice felt like a ghost sitting behind them, whispering truths they were never meant to hear. Your ancestors feared us, the human voice said. Not because we were monsters. Because we survived things they could not. The sound was filled with deep emotion, not anger, not hatred, but the exhaustion of a species carrying scars no one else wanted to acknowledge. Suddenly, every screen across the flagship flickered, then displayed something unexpected, an old hologram from humanity's past. It began with a simple scene, children playing in green fields under a blue sky, human cities glowing in the sunlight, people smiling. The crew stared in confusion. These didn't look like monsters. These didn't look like the violent creatures their history books described. These looked like families. Mothers holding babies. Scientists building machines. Students learning. The Vexorians watched in silence, their hearts sinking deeper. Then the hologram shifted. The sky darkened. Explosions tore through human cities. Screams filled the air. Soldiers ran through flaming streets, holding wounded civilians in their arms. The crew watched, frozen in horror. They had never seen such footage. Their ancestors had erased it. Erased the truth. The hologram showed entire human colonies defending themselves with outdated weapons against fleets 10 times their size. It showed humans begging for peace, pleading for mercy, before being bombarded without warning. It showed cities vaporized in seconds. And through it all, the Terran flag burned but never fell. Some crew members cried openly now. Others dropped to their knees, the weight of truth crushing their pride. Commander Trivax covered his mouth with one trembling hand as the final image appeared. An underground human shelter, lights flickering, children crying in fear while their parents covered them with their arms. The hologram froze on a mother hugging her child as dust rained from the ceiling. Then the screen went black. No sound. No movement. No words. Only silence. A silence that felt like sorrow heavy enough to fill the entire ship. Trivax finally whispered, voice breaking, Why didn't we know any of this? The answer came through the speakers like a soft, tired sigh. Because the galaxy feared the truth. The human voice now sounded closer, clearer, as if standing in the room. You feared what we endured. You feared what you did. You feared what we became. The crew trembled. Trivax felt tears fall down his face before he even realized he was crying. Then the voice changed, still calm, still soft, but with a deeper sadness. We are not here to punish you, it said. We are here so the truth can breathe again. No one spoke for a long moment. The voice continued. We survived because we had to. We built because we had no choice. We hid because you left us no place to stand. The voice paused, as if holding back its own grief. But we did not forget. The words echoed through the ship like a quiet heartbeat. No threats. No rage. Only remembrance. Only truth. Only the weight of a story buried too long. The Vexorian crew bowed their heads in shame. Their ancestors had painted humans as monsters, yet here they were, gentle, sorrowful, wounded, but standing stronger than ever. For the first time, Trivax understood something deeply, painfully true. The Terran battleship had not come to destroy them. It came to show them what the galaxy had tried to erase. It came to force them to see the truth that lived beneath the lies. The voice faded slowly, the last sentence wrapping around every soul in the fleet. We survived your past, but you must survive your truth. The transmission ended. The screens went dark again. And the Vexorian fleet continued drifting in stunned silence, each ship carrying the same heavy thought. The Vexorian fleet returned home in complete silence, but the silence did not stay with them. It spread across the galaxy like smoke from an unseen fire. Within hours, every major empire learned what the Vexorians had seen. Rumors turned into fear, fear turned into panic, and soon the entire galaxy trembled at the same name it once mocked. Humans. Governments that had not spoken in decades contacted each other with shaking voices, demanding answers no one had. Commanders stood over holographic maps, staring at outdated diagrams of Terran ships that looked nothing like the monster the Vexorians described. The old records were lies. Everyone knew that now. The truth, the real truth, stood like a shadow behind every political chamber. If the humans were back, the galaxy had no way to stop them. On the Vexorian homeworld, the council sat in emergency session, their faces pale, their hands trembling as they replayed the footage of the Terran battleship again and again. Some leaders begged to open communication channels and apologize. Others demanded they prepare for war, as if war meant anything against a species that shut down a fleet without firing a single weapon. Admiral Korvax, the oldest and most respected military leader in the Empire, stood up slowly, leaning on the table with weary hands. "We cannot fight them," he whispered, voice breaking with emotion. "We are children throwing stones at a mountain." His words shocked the room, but no one argued. Everyone knew it was true. Across the galaxy, alien scientists examined corrupted Vexorian scanner data, trying to understand how the Terran ship disabled their systems. Nothing made sense. The power signature didn't match any known form of energy. The material of the hull could not be identified. The engine readings were impossible. Too quiet, too efficient, too perfect. One scientist, a young researcher named Emra, stared at the readings for hours, tears filling her eyes as she whispered to herself, "They're not ahead of us by years, they're ahead by centuries." She felt her heart ache, not out of fear, but from sadness, because she realized how deeply her people had wronged the humans. Emra thought about the hologram of human families she saw, the pain in the Terran voice, the quiet strength in the battleship's movements. She looked at the data and felt ashamed to be part of a galaxy that erased such a people. "We owe them more than apologies," she whispered. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, the Chthorian Empire prepared its mighty fleet, thousands of ships rising from planetary docks like a swarm of metallic insects. But even as engines roared and cannons charged, soldiers stood nervously, staring at the stars with haunted eyes. They had seen the Vexorian footage too. They knew what was out there. A young Chthorian marine gripped his rifle tightly, his claws shaking. "Why are we preparing to fight something we can't hurt?" he asked his commander. The commander paused, lowering his voice. "Because doing nothing feels worse." But both of them knew the truth. Terran technology wasn't something they could match. Terran willpower wasn't something they could break. Terran ships weren't something they could destroy. The galaxy had prepared for every enemy except the one it erased from its own history. In hidden corners of every world, ordinary citizens gathered around screens, watching the grainy, terrifying image of the Terran battleship drifting out of darkness like a sleeping giant. Many cried. Many prayed. Many felt guilt gnawing at their souls. An old alien historian named Velrin sat alone in his dim library, surrounded by dusty books filled with false stories about human savagery. He opened one of the books, stared at the lies written inside, then closed it with shaking hands. "We were the monsters," he whispered. His breath hitched as he realized how much his people had hidden, how many truths they buried, how much they feared the humans, and how far they went to erase them. Back within the Vexorian Council Tower, Commander Trivax stood before a panel of leaders, recounting every detail of their encounter. His voice cracked, his hands trembled, and at one point he had to stop speaking entirely because the memory of the Terran voice replayed too loudly in his mind. "They didn't threaten us," he whispered, eyes glassy. "They didn't need to. Their silence told us everything." The council members shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet his gaze. "And what did their silence say?" one of them finally asked. Trivax looked up slowly, his eyes burning with a cocktail of fear and awe. That we are alive because they allow it. The room fell into terrified quiet. Across the galaxy, fleets armed themselves, but their movements were slow, hesitant, driven by fear rather than courage. Soldiers trained, but their hearts weren't in it. Leaders issued speeches about caution and readiness, but their voices shook with every word. Everyone knew the truth. The galaxy could prepare all it wanted. But humans had prepared longer. Humans had built in shadows. Humans had evolved in silence. Humans had survived the purge by becoming something unstoppable. And deep in the void beyond the Vexorian border, unseen by any scanner, the Terran battleship drifted through darkness with slow, patient grace. It watched. It listened. It waited. Not for war, but for what came next. For the galaxy to face a truth thousands of years overdue. Because the Terrans weren't coming back as conquerors. They weren't coming back as victims. They were coming back as something the galaxy never expected. Survivors who had become guardians. Silent. Powerful. Unforgettable. The galaxy was drowning in fear when the first human transmission reached every world at once, as if the voice had traveled through the very bones of space rather than any communication system. One moment, the stars were silent. The next, every screen flickered with static. Every speaker crackled with a soft, trembling hum that made even hardened soldiers freeze where they stood. Across the Vexorian homeworld, citizens ran to windows, leaders rushed to control rooms, and millions held their breath as the static grew louder, forming a slow, vibrating rhythm that felt like a heartbeat returning after centuries of silence. Then, without warning, the hum stopped. A soft exhale echoed across every device. And a single human word filled the galaxy: listen. That one word carried more power than 1,000 war fleets. Every creature, on every world, turned toward the sound instinctively. The voice that followed was calm, quiet, tired, and yet filled with a strength that made even the bravest warriors feel like children standing in front of a storm. You feared us, the voice said, not accusing but speaking like someone stating a fact carved in stone. You feared what we were. Not because we were monsters, but because you saw in us something you could never break. Commander Trivax stood in the Vexorian command tower, trembling, his fists clenched as the human voice echoed in his mind like a memory from a life he never lived. The voice continued, a soft sadness drifting through every syllable. You erased us from your history. You destroyed our homes. You hunted us until the stars could not hold our cries. Images flashed across the screens, terrifying real footage, not edited, not filtered. Scenes of humans running through burning cities. Terran soldiers dragging injured civilians into bunkers as alien warships bombarded the surface. Cries of children. Fires swallowing streets. Families torn apart. The Vexorians stared with hollow eyes, unable to breathe as they watched the truth their ancestors hid. Many felt their stomachs twist with guilt so strong it made them shake uncontrollably. The hologram shifted again, showing humans building in darkness. Giant underground rooms filled with broken tools and wounded workers. Hidden for centuries. Surviving in silence because the galaxy refused to let them live. We begged for peace, the voice whispered, cracking with emotion. But peace was denied to us. The scene changed. Human scientists constructing the first secret Terran starship. Humans, covered in dust and scars, forging metal with their bare hands. Mothers teaching children in dim tunnels. Soldiers training quietly, knowing they might never see sunlight again. And then, the first Terran battleship rising from the shadowy depth of an asteroid dock. It rose slowly, like a creature waking from a long, painful sleep. The hologram zoomed in on the hull. Names were carved into the metal. Thousands of names. Humans who had died during the purge. Humans the galaxy had forgotten. Tears ran down faces across 1,000 worlds as they realized the truth. Every Terran battleship was a tomb and a promise. A tomb for those the galaxy murdered. And a promise that humans would never vanish again. The voice returned, softer now, filled with emotion deeper than sorrow. We did not come back to avenge them. That sentence sent a wave of relief across the galaxy, but it was short-lived. We came back so the galaxy would see what it chose to forget. Trembling hands covered mouths. Soldiers lowered their weapons. Leaders looked at each other with shame burning in their eyes. The truth felt like a blade, cutting through every lie written in their history books. On the Vexorian homeworld, Selka, the pilot who had stared death in the face, felt tears roll silently down her cheeks. She whispered, "I didn't know. I didn't know humans suffered like that." Her co-pilot placed a shaking hand on her shoulder. "None of us knew," he whispered back. "That's the problem." The human voice continued, steadier now, almost gentle. "We did not return to take worlds. We did not return to rule your skies." The galaxy exhaled in cautious hope. "We returned because balance must be restored." That hope cracked hard. The transmission shifted again. This time, it displayed footage of ancient council meetings, alien leaders laughing as human worlds burned, generals bragging about wiping out Terran colonies, politicians rewriting history. The galaxy felt sick, physically sick. Children watching from their homes cried openly, asking their parents why their ancestors did that. Parents had no answers. Some fell to their knees. Some turned away. Some whispered apologies through tears. When the footage ended, the human voice spoke again. Soft, nearly breaking. "This is your past," it said. "Not ours. We lived it. You buried it." A long, heavy silence followed. No one dared breathe. No one dared look away from the screens. And then the voice delivered the final blow. "We survived because the weak do not survive. We rose because the forgotten do not stay forgotten." The voice paused, letting the truth sink into every soul in the galaxy. The galaxy had no time to recover from the human transmission before something even more terrifying happened. Every long-range scanner, every deep space probe, every silent listening station suddenly detected movement from regions of space that had been empty for thousands of years. It began slowly, tiny blips of energy, faint shapes rising in the dark. But within minutes, the truth became too clear to deny. More Terran ships were waking up. Not one, not 10, hundreds, thousands. Hidden fleets that had slept beneath broken moons, inside hollowed asteroids, deep within dead star systems now glowed with life again. Across the Vexorian capital, alarms blared, citizens ran into the streets, and commanders swarmed around holographic maps that showed entire corners of the galaxy lighting up with Terran power. The fear that spread was not the loud kind. It was the silent kind, the kind that wrapped itself around the heart and squeezed until breathing felt difficult. But mixed with that fear was something unexpected: grief. Men, women, soldiers, scientists, they all felt it. Because every Terran ship waking in the darkness was a reminder of what humans had endured, of how long they had waited, of what the galaxy refused to face. Commander Trivax stood on the main balcony of the Vexorian Council Tower, staring at the night sky with wide, trembling eyes. Tiny blue glows flickered like stars being born, but he knew they weren't stars. Those were Terran engines, igniting after centuries of silence. "How many did they build?" he whispered. His voice cracked under the weight of the truth. An officer beside him swallowed hard. "Too many. Far more than we ever imagined." Trivax closed his eyes, pain filling his chest. Not pain from fear. Pain from guilt. "They hid from us," he whispered softly. "Not because they were weak, but because they were grieving." The words tasted bitter, heavy. Everywhere on the planet, screens replayed the human holograms. Children crying in bunkers, families lost in burning cities, soldiers fighting until their bodies could no longer move. And now, seeing the Terran fleets rising again, the galaxy finally understood. Those ships were not weapons. They were memorials, built by hands that had lost everything. In the distant Kereth Empire, elders gathered in a circle, holding hands in silence as the sky above them flashed with distant Terran light. Some whispered prayers. Others begged for forgiveness. A child in the group looked up at her grandmother with teary eyes and asked, "Are the humans coming to punish us?" The grandmother shook her head slowly, her own eyes shimmering. "No, they already punished us." The child frowned. "How?" The grandmother's voice trembled. "By reminding us what we became." The child didn't understand, but the adults did. Every empire did. The Terrans were not showing their power, they were showing the galaxy its guilt. Across the stars, panic meetings turned into desperate arguments. Generals shouted about defending borders. Politicians whispered about negotiating. Scientists begged leaders to stay calm. But no one could calm the terror rising in their hearts as Terran fleets positioned themselves with impossible precision across the galaxy. No messages were sent. No threats were broadcast. The humans did nothing. And that nothing felt more terrifying than any war. Because silence meant confidence. Silence meant control. Silence meant the galaxy had no idea what the Terrans truly wanted. A Chthorian minister slammed his fist on the table. "Why won't they speak again?" he shouted, voice cracking. An elderly advisor answered through tears, "Because they've already said everything. Now they're waiting to see what we do." The room fell quiet. No one had a response. Meanwhile, deep within the Terran exclusion zone, massive gates, ancient, metallic, taller than mountains, opened for the first time in recorded history. Hidden Terran cities came into view, glowing like fireflies across dark worlds the galaxy never knew existed. Human families walked beneath tall towers. Soldiers patrolled calm streets. Children played under artificial skies. Humanity had not been rebuilding for a few centuries. They had been growing an entire civilization, stronger, smarter, quieter, and more united than ever before. And as the Terran fleets rose around these worlds, the message became painfully clear. Humans hadn't simply survived. They had thrived. Back in the Vexorian fleet chamber, Selka sat alone in her fighter cockpit, replaying the human transmission again and again, each time feeling a deeper ache inside her chest. She whispered through shaking breaths, "We didn't lose to them, we failed them." Her co-pilot approached from behind, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Selka," she shook her head, tears dripping onto her hands. "Why didn't anyone tell us the truth? Why did they erase everything?" His voice softened. "Because they were afraid of humans." She looked up at him with trembling eyes. "But now I understand, they were afraid of the humans we created." That realization spread across the galaxy like a quiet echo, reaching every soul who saw the Terran fleets rising like ghosts returning home. The galaxy had been shaking with fear for days, watching Terran fleets awaken like giants stretching after a 1,000-year sleep, but nothing prepared them for the moment when the humans finally moved with purpose. It began with a soft pulse, just a faint ripple of blue light that traveled across the void like a slow heartbeat. The pulse touched every Terran ship, every hidden station, every silent patrol craft, and one by one, their engines flared to life with cold blue fire. Across the Vexorian capital, across the Chthorian Empire, across every world listening with trembling breath, billions watched their screens as the Terran fleets reorganized with a precision no alien species could even dream of. Not one ship drifted off course. Not one formation broke. They moved like one single living organism made of metal and history and grief. Commander Trivax felt his throat close as he watched the massive Terran battleship from their encounter slide into position at the head of one of the armadas. "They're mobilizing," he whispered, horrified. Captain Relva beside him shook his head, voice barely audible. "No, they're judging." Across the galaxy, alien fleets scrambled into defensive positions. Ships screamed across the skies, shields flaring, engines burning hot with panic, but it all felt useless. Their movements were frantic, messy, fear-driven. Meanwhile, the Terran fleets moved with calm grace, their sharp-edged ships gliding through the void as if guided by the same heartbeat. And then something happened that froze every living soul. The Terran armadas split into 5 groups, each moving toward a different empire that participated in the ancient purge. The Vexorians, the Chthorians, the Zorlax, the Yeran Collective, the Varnok Dominion. Every empire whose ancestors once helped erase humanity from the stars. Every empire now watched massive Terran shadows approaching their borders. Some governments collapsed into panic. Others begged their fleets to stay calm. Children cried as alarms echoed across cities. Elders whispered ancient prayers. And through all of this, one truth weighed on every heart like stone. the Terrans were not aiming to conquer. They were aiming to answer a question the galaxy refused to face. What do you do when the ghosts you created come home? When the first Terran armada reached the Varnock border, the galaxy held its breath. The Varnock Empire fired first. Thousands of missiles, plasma torpedoes, beam cannons, everything they had. The sky lit up like a burning sun. But the Terran ships did not move. Their shields absorbed the entire storm without a flicker. Weapons that could melt mountains simply vanished into their hull armor like harmless sparks. When the smoke cleared, the Terran ships were untouched. Not a scratch. Not a tremble. Not even a shift in their formation. The Varnock soldiers stared, numb with terror. Some dropped their weapons, some fell to their knees, and some whispered, "We deserve this." The Terran response came a moment later, not with fire, not with death. Not with revenge. A silent wave of blue energy rolled from the human flagship, spreading like a calm breath across the Varnock fleet. Within seconds, every Varnock ship went dark. Engines shut down. Weapons cracked offline. Shields collapsed. Thousands of warships became silent statues drifting helplessly through the void. And the Terrans did not fire again. Across the galaxy, the same scene repeated. The Zorlax tried to stand their ground. They lasted 7 seconds before their armada fell dark. The Chthorians launched their entire planetary defense grid. Every system failed. The Yeren Collective deployed stealth cruisers. Terran sensors exposed them instantly, disabling them with soft pulses of light. And when the Terran armada reached the Vexorian border, the entire Vexorian fleet trembled as their systems died before they even had time to raise shields. Not a single human weapon destroyed a ship. Not one life was taken. Yet every empire fell to its knees without a chance to resist. That was the moment the galaxy understood the terrifying truth. The Terrans had not come to kill. They had come to show exactly how powerless the galaxy truly was. Inside the Vexorian command tower, Selka watched in horror as hundreds of Vexorian warships drifted helplessly on her screen, dark and silent, like a graveyard frozen in time. She gripped the edge of the console, tears gathering in her eyes. "They aren't monsters," she whispered. They're showing us who we became." Her voice trembling. Her co-pilot stepped up behind her, eyes filled with fear. "Then what comes next?" Selka shook her head slowly. "Judgment." Across the stars, more Terran fleets arrived, hovering above capital worlds but never firing, positioning themselves with the chilling calm of a species who no longer feared anything. Civilians screamed. Families hid. Leaders begged for mercy in shaky broadcasts. But the Terrans remained silent. Watching. Measuring. Waiting. And then, as every empire drifted in helpless fear, the human flagship in the center of the galaxy powered a bright white beam upward, straight into the void. The galaxy gasped, thinking this was the moment destruction would come. But the beam did not attack. It projected something. A hologram. A simple image. The Terran symbol, a hand holding a burning star, appeared above every capital world, every fleet, every outpost. Not as a threat. As a reminder. As truth. Under the symbol appeared one sentence, written in Old Terran English: "We see you now." A wave of emotion, fear, shame, sorrow, tore through the galaxy. Every empire knew what it meant. The Terrans had judged them. And they found the galaxy guilty, not of attacking the humans today, but of lying about the humans yesterday. As the Terran fleets drifted silently, waiting for the galaxy's response, one realization echoed across every world, in every heart, in every trembling breath. The humans were not here for war. They were here for the truth. And the truth frightened the galaxy more than any weapon ever could. The galaxy waited in a silence so deep it felt like the stars themselves were holding their breath as the Terran fleets hovered patiently above every guilty empire, their dark hulls glowing with cold blue light, their engines whispering like ancient guardians awakened after centuries of grief. No weapon fired. No warning came. No voice spoke. That silence was heavier than any war cry, heavier than any cannon blast, heavier than the weight of 1,000 worlds. Children clung to their parents, soldiers knelt with trembling hands, and leaders stood frozen in their chambers as the Terran symbol, a hand holding a burning star, shone above their skies like a second sun. Commander Trivax stared at the symbol through the giant window of the Vexorian Council chamber, feeling his heart squeeze painfully in his chest. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a declaration of war. It was a reminder of everything the galaxy had done, everything it had buried, everything it hoped would never return. But the past had returned, wrapped in steel, carried by ships built in darkness, carried by a species the galaxy tried to erase. Trivax whispered, "What do they want from us?" His voice was small, fragile, as if speaking too loudly would break the thin thread of peace holding the galaxy together. But before anyone could answer, the Terran flagship, the same giant that froze the Vexorian fleet days ago, moved with slow, deliberate grace. Its hull split open along the center, revealing a glowing chamber filled with soft white light. And from that light emerged a hologram that spread across every world, every ship, every screen, every sky. A human. A single human standing tall in sleek dark armor, his face calm, his eyes tired but bright with a fire no one could extinguish. The galaxy fell silent again. The hologram human looked around, as if gazing into the souls of billions. When he spoke, his voice was gentle, quiet, but carried the weight of 1,000 lost years. "You feared us," he said softly. "You erased us. You hunted us. You told your children we were myths." His voice trembled not with anger, but with old pain that never healed. "But we survived." The hologram shifted behind him, showing images of hidden Terran cities glowing beneath mountains of stone, children learning under artificial skies, soldiers training in silence, shipyards carved from asteroids, humanity rising in the dark like a flower growing between stones. The images made entire civilizations cry. "We rebuilt," the human continued, his voice becoming stronger. "Not to conquer your worlds, not to rule your stars, but because life does not end simply because you choose to forget it." The hologram changed again, showing the Great Purge, showing human cities burning, mothers carrying children through smoke, Terran soldiers fighting until their hands bled. Many in the galaxy bowed their heads, unable to watch. It was too real, too painful, too human. Then the hologram went still. The human looked forward again. "We stand here now not to destroy what remains of your empires," he said. "We stand here so you will never again hide behind lies." Every world watched, breath locked inside trembling chests. Even the strongest leaders felt tears forming in their eyes. "And now," the human said softly, "we will leave you with a choice." The Terran fleets shifted slightly, their engines lighting the darkness like a field of blue stars. "You may continue your wars, your greed, your pride, but you will do so under our watch." The meaning hit the galaxy like a bolt of lightning. Or, the human continued, "you can build a future where no species is erased again." The hologram dimmed, the human's outline flickering softly. "We are not your rulers," he whispered. "We are your reminder." Those words wrapped around every soul, heavy with truth and hope at the same time. A hope no one expected. A hope that felt like a fragile light returning after centuries of darkness. And then, with a single breath, the hologram faded. Every Terran ship turned toward the uncharted abyss beyond the galaxy, engines glowing. Slowly, silently, the fleets began to retreat. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with calm dignity. Civilians gathered in the streets, watching in stunned silence as the massive Terran armadas pulled away from their worlds, leaving no damage behind, only the weight of truth and the memory of what humanity survived. The ships moved like shadows returning to the place they were born from, leaving trails of blue light that looked like tears falling across the night sky. Commander Trivax pressed a hand to the window, his voice shaking. "They are leaving." Behind him, the council stood frozen, knowing they had witnessed something no history book could ever fully describe. Something that changed every belief they ever held. Something that would echo across generations as the last Terran battleship disappeared into the darkness. A final message appeared across the galaxy's skies. Simple, quiet, unforgettable. "Do not forget us again." And with that, humanity was gone, not defeated, not victorious, but something far greater, the silent guardians of a future the galaxy had yet to earn. The stars looked different after that day. The galaxy breathed differently, and deep inside the void, where light struggled to reach, humanity watched, waiting, guarding, remembering.